I'd love to tell you it all hit me like a bolt out of the blue. That one day Alina just woke up a stranger, someone I couldn't even recognize. But nah, it wasn't like that, it crept up slow, like a hairline crack sneaking through the concrete of a house you swore was rock solid. Me and Alina, we started out as a team, two folks on the same level. She had this spark, ambition, charm, a fire in her belly that hooked me deep. Man, I fell for her hard because of that. When she kicked off her gig as a social media influencer, I was right there, her #1 fan, rooting her on. Back in those days, I bought into her dream just as much as she did, felt like it was ours together. But then success rolled in, and it twisted her. Or maybe it just peeled back the mask and showed me who she'd been all along. It kicked off with small stuff, little jabs that pricked me but didn't seem worth a fight. How about you pitch in more around here? She'd toss out, cool as you please, even though she knew damn well I'd ditched my job to stay home with Mia and Jacob so she could chase her spotlight. I chalked it up to the cost of keeping us together, swallowing my pride like a bitter pill, 'cause I figured it was all for the family's big win. In my head, I was playing the hero, giving up my career to lift hers up. But to Alina? That wasn't some noble move, it was just me being weak. Things really started splitting apart when Marcus showed up. I'll never shake that first meeting. Guy swaggered in, loud as a bullhorn, cocky as hell, dripping with that fake bravado you only get from dirty cash. "This here's Marcus," Alina said one night, bringing him into our living room like it was no big deal. "He's my business partner." But the way her eyes lit up when she glanced his way, that told a different story, something more was brewing there. Marcus was the total opposite of me, flashy, pushy, and didn't give a damn who he stepped on. He didn't even try to mask how much he looked down on me. "Must be sweet," he sneered one time, smirking like a jackass, "kicking back at home while your lady runs the show." The words didn't bug me half as much as Alina's reaction, or lack of one. She just stood there, mute, not a peep to back me up. That quiet hit harder than anything Marcus could have slung at me. It all boiled over the night Alina threw that damn dinner party. She wanted me playing perfect host, pouring drinks, hauling plates, keeping her buddies comfy. Felt like I was the hired help, and it stung bad. I tried to push back, tell her I wasn't cool with it, but she shut me down with this icy stare. "Don't make a fool of me," she snapped under her breath. The Alina I'd married? Gone. In her place was this woman who saw me as a dead weight holding her back. Her guests showed up, hooting and hollering, knocking back drinks like it was a frat house. Marcus, naturally, owned the room. Alina was glued to his every word, her laugh too sharp, her hand lingering on him too long. I hung back in the corner, trying to keep my cool while they traded whispers and smirks, eyes flicking my way like I was the entertainment. Then it happened, Marcus lobbed a cheap shot. Some crack about how real men don't let their wives call the shots. I'd hit my limit. "That's enough," I said, voice steady but solid as steel. The room froze for a beat. Then Alina stepped up, and out of nowhere, she hauled off and slapped me, right across the face. Hard. The sting was nothing next to what came after. Marcus let out this big, ugly laugh. Her friends piled on, cackling, and Alina. She stood there looking like she'd won something. I was rooted there, face hot, guts churning, their laughter bouncing around in my skull. But as I turned and walked off, something flipped inside me. It wasn't just shame anymore, I was done. Done being the doormat, the guy she could smack around and parade for laughs. That night, I decided, nobody's laughing at me again. There's this thing about getting laughed at that messes with a man's head. Not the friendly ribbing you shrug off or the dumb jokes you let slide, this was different. It was that deep, nasty kind of laughter that rips you open, leaves you naked in front of a crowd. The kind that screams you're not just part of the gag, you are the gag. That's what they did to me that night. And you know what? It wasn't even the slap that broke me. It was Alina's smug little grin after, the way her pals howled like a pack of wild dogs, and Marcus cutting through it all with that smug, "Man up, Nathan. Even your wife knows you're a pushover." That line from Marcus burned in my head. Man, I wanted to bolt out of there. No, scratch that, I wanted to yell my lungs out, flip that damn table over, grab Marcus by his smug collar, and chuck him and his ego right out my front door. But I didn't do any of it. Instead, I just stood there like a statue, their laughter bouncing around the room like a hail of gunfire. My ears were on fire, my eyes went fuzzy, and my fists balled up so tight I could feel my nails biting into my skin. Every nerve in me was screaming to push back, to fire off a comeback, to do something. But I held back. Not 'cause I was afraid of them, no, it was 'cause I knew it wouldn't change a damn thing. In their minds, Alina had already come out on top. To that crew, I was just the chump sulking in the corner, small time and beat down. As I shuffled out of the room, their cackling trailed me down the hall like a bad smell I couldn't shake. I got to the kitchen, propped myself against the counter, and let out a ragged breath. My heart was hammering, hands shaking like leaves in a storm. That shame wasn't just sitting on me, it was crushing me, like I was choking on it, going under. I could still hear them out there, their voices getting rowdier as the booze kept flowing. Alina's laugh cut through the noise, sharp and mean, nothing like that soft, sweet sound that used to hook me way back when. I thought about Mia and Jacob, snoozing upstairs, no clue what their old man had just taken on the chin. For a second, I felt like a failure, not for what went down, but for letting it go down. What kind of dad was I being for them? Showing them it's fine to get walked on. That it's cool to eat humiliation and not say a word. That a guy can have his pride stripped bare and just take it. I gritted my teeth. Nah, this couldn't fly. But I wasn't about to go off half-cocked either, I had to play it smart, think it through, bide my time. I splashed some cold water on my face, staring at the guy in the kitchen window's reflection. That dude wasn't the Nathan I used to know. He looked worn out, beat up, dragged through the mud. But under all that mess, I caught a spark of something, grit, maybe. Right then, it hit me, I wasn't just embarrassed, I was fed up. Done being the laid-back husband who let stuff slide to keep the peace. Done letting Alina stomp all over me. Done looking like a clown in front of her posse. This wasn't about ego anymore, it was about respecting myself. When I strolled back into the living room, the party was roaring again. Marcus was yapping away with another one of his loudmouth tales. Alina was parked on the arm of his chair, soaking up every word. Her buddies were all huddled close, eating up his garbage like it was gold. Nobody even clocked that I'd slipped back in, which was perfect by me. I plopped down on the couch way in the back, just watching, sizing things up quiet-like. Something shifted in me right then, I felt steady, cool-headed. The sting of that humiliation was still bubbling under my skin, but it wasn't swallowing me whole anymore. Instead, I had this clear-headed feeling washing over me. I didn't need to holler or toss furniture around. Nah, my payback was gonna be smoother, sharper. All I had to do was wait for the right shot. Sitting there, listening to Marcus crow about his latest hustle while Alina giggled like a schoolgirl, it clicked, they had no clue what was brewing. Not a single one of them did. They figured I was soft, a broken guy with nothing left. Boy, were they off the mark. This wasn't the end of my story, it was the kickoff. See, getting humiliated like that does one of two things to a guy, it either busts him wide open or hones him like a blade. That night, parked in the corner of my own damn house, surrounded by folks who thought I was dirt under their boots, I picked my path. I wasn't gonna flip out or give Alina, Marcus, or her hyena pack friends the thrill of watching me crack. Nope, I'd hit back in a way they'd never see coming. Let me rewind a few months, back to when the first hints of this mess started dropping. I wasn't always the oblivious sap Alina painted me as. I'd had a hunch something was screwy for a while. It started with her phone. Late nights, when she figured I was out cold, she'd sneak out of bed and mutter into it real soft. At first, I talked myself down, probably just work calls, nothing shady, right? But then came the out-of-nowhere trips, the cash disappearing with no explanation, and, yeah, Marcus. He wasn't just some business partner, I could tell by how Alina's whole face brightened when he strutted in. She'd lean in a little too tight, crack up way too loud at his lame punchlines. You didn't need to be a rocket scientist to put it together. But instead of blowing up at her, I did what I'm good at, I watched. Kept it low-key, patient, digging into the mess bit by bit. It wasn't jealousy driving me, it was this gnawing itch to figure out what I was really up against. Marcus wasn't just a slimy hustler. Guy was trouble, big time. All that glitz he flaunted. It didn't come from clean deals. Nah, it was crooked cash, fraud, laundering, even whispers of moving drugs. And Alina? She wasn't just along for the ride. She was in it up to her neck. Bank accounts with her name on them were shuffling the money around. She was so dazzled by the shine of it all, she didn't see the floor cracking under her. At first, I wanted to shield her. Even with our marriage turning to junk, I still had some love left for her deep down. But the more dirt I dug up, the tougher it got to see her as the girl I'd said I do to. She wasn't just wild, she was out for herself, ready to gamble everything for a flashy image in Marcus's thumbs up. I knew I couldn't tackle this solo, so I hit up an old buddy, Inspector Parker, who worked financial crimes. Parker hooked me up with what I needed to start stacking proof: bank records, sketchy emails, fishy money moves. It was all right there, like a map pointing straight to the ugly truth. Week after week, I slipped it all to Parker, one piece at a time. The cops pieced their case together while I kept my mouth shut, eyes open, waiting it out. That loops us back to that dinner party night. I wasn't just sitting there all quiet, 'cause I'd given up. Nah, I was cool as a cucumber, 'cause I knew what was coming down the pike. Every loud word out of Marcus's mouth, every smirk from Alina, every cheap shot her pals threw my way, it just stoked the coals burning inside me. But on the outside, I played it smooth, nailed the part perfectly. The whipped, quiet husband they all figured I was. They didn't have a clue about the thunder rolling their way. Before the shindig even kicked off, I'd tipped Parker off, gave him the exact when and where to nab Marcus and Alina's crew. It was all lined up like clockwork. All I had to do was grit my teeth through 9 more minutes of their crap, 9 minutes of Marcus crowing, Alina laughing at me biting my lip. Wasn't a cakewalk, but I hung in there, knowing every second ticked me closer to the payoff. While their laughs swirled around like a bad wind, I kept my stare level, my breathing steady. To them, I still looked like the broken guy they'd pegged me for. But inside, I was buzzing, ready to burst. The storm was barreling in, and they wouldn't spot it, till it slammed flat. 9 minutes. That's all I had to stomach, 9 minutes of their taunts, their jabs, their stuck-up grins. You'd think it'd drag on forever, but for me, it zipped by. Every click of the clock was another step toward flipping this whole damn game. And then it started, bam, a knock at the door. Not some soft tap like a buddy dropping by late. No, this was a hard, no-nonsense pound, the kind that snaps heads around. The room went dead quiet for the first time all night. Alina looked ticked off. Marcus just grinned, all cocky, while her friends swapped puzzled looks. You got more company coming? Marcus tossed out, lounging back in his chair like he owned the place. Alina shook her head, annoyed at the hiccup. Nathan, she barked, flicking her hand at the door like I was her errand boy. I didn't say a word, just got up, straightened my shirt, and headed over, heart thumping not from nerves, but from the rush of what was about to drop. I swung the door open, and there they were, a squad of cops decked out in black gear, badges flashing under the porch light like warning signals. Leading the pack was Inspector Parker, his face locked in that razor-sharp focus I'd only seen a handful of times. I didn't say a word, just stepped back and let him roll in. Marcus I, Adil, Parker barked, his voice slicing through the room like a saw blade. You're under arrest, fraud, money laundering, drug trafficking. For a split second, it was dead quiet. Then all hell broke loose. Marcus jumped up, that big shot attitude melting away faster than ice in a microwave. This ain't right, he hollered, stumbling back as a couple of officers closed in. You don't even know who I am. Alina stood there like a deer in headlights, her eyes bouncing between Marcus and the cops. Hold up, she sputtered, voice wobbly. There's gotta be some mix-up here. But Parker didn't even blink, just gave a quick nod, and the officers snapped cuffs on Marcus slick as you please. One of Alina's pals, freaking out, made a break for the back door, but another cop was already posted up, cutting her off. In no time flat, 2 more of her crew were locked up, their whining swallowed by the whirlwind of badges and boots stomping around. And Alina? She was a ghost of herself, pale, shaky, that cocky mask she wore peeling right off in front of me. What's happening? She snapped, her voice climbing with panic. This can't be real. I didn't bother replying. Didn't have to. I just stood there, arms folded, watching the truth sink into her like a slow leak. Marcus, her untouchable partner, wasn't bulletproof after all. Her buddies, who'd been snickering at me not 10 minutes ago, were begging now. And Alina? She was finally catching a glimpse of the mess she'd made. But the night wasn't through tossing curveballs. As they hauled Marcus toward the door, he keeled over, grabbing at his chest like a bad actor. I figured it was a con at first, another slimeball trick to wiggle free. Then his face went this sickly gray, and he started wheezing hard. One of the cops yelled for medics, and they screeched up in minutes. They strapped Marcus to a stretcher, his swagger traded for a look of pure desperation. Alina's friends weren't holding up much better, one passed out cold, hitting the deck as the panic got her. Another was gasping, clawing at her shirt like the guilt was choking her out. What used to be a loud, smug party was now a circus of chaos, paramedics and cops weaving through the mess like it was a war zone. Me? I just stood there, steady as a rock, taking in the storm I'd kicked loose as it tore through their world. For the first time that night, hell, maybe in years, I felt something real, payback hitting just right. When they finally carted Marcus and Alina's crew off in the ambulances, she spun toward me, her face all shock and hurt, like I'd stabbed her in the back. How could you pull this? She whispered, barely loud enough to hear. I locked eyes with her, keeping my face stone cold. 9 minutes back, you smacked me in front of your pals, I said, voice even as a flatline. This? It's only the start. Once the dust settled, the house went quiet, eerie quiet. That room, packed with their mocking laughs and jabs not long ago, was a disaster now, chairs flipped, glasses ditched, and Alina standing smack in the middle, gripping a chair like it was the only thing keeping her upright. She stared at me, eyes big with confusion and something darker, fear, maybe. I didn't budge, didn't open my mouth. Just let the heaviness of it all hang there between us. You set this up, she croaked finally, her voice cracking. It wasn't a jab, it was like she was piecing it together, realizing the guy she'd laughed off, walked over, and shamed was the one who'd brought her house of cards crashing down. I didn't waste breath answering. What was there to add? Her whole fake kingdom had caved in, and now she had to sit in the wreckage. By morning, the fallout hit like wildfire, gossip spreads quick when it's juicy. Marcus's bust was all over the news, and the rest of them got dragged into the spotlight too. Fraud, money laundering, drug trafficking, it was all laid bare now. The internet, where Alina used to strut like a queen, turned into her personal hell. Her social media got slammed with comments, most of them nasty as a junkyard dog. One by one, the brands she teamed up with dropped statements cutting ties, like rats jumping a sinking ship. Pretty soon, her accounts went dark. Either she pulled the plug or the platforms did it for her. The cash from sponsorships dried up fast, those sweet deals evaporated, and the fake world she'd built came tumbling down like a house of cards. By week's end, the investigation locked her bank accounts tight. All that flash, fancy threads, high-end purses, that slick car, it was history, either snatched as evidence or sold off to plug the holes she'd dug. But the real kicker wasn't the stuff she lost. It was the people. Those buddies of hers, the same ones who'd cackled at me that night, flipped on her quicker than a light switch. They pointed fingers, swearing she'd roped them into Marcus's dirty games. One after another, they bailed, leaving her to choke on the mess solo. And Marcus? Guy didn't waste a second tossing her to the wolves from his jail cell. He spun a tale that she was all in, knew every dime she washed, every shady move he pulled. True or not, it didn't even matter. The hit was landed. Alina wasn't just down, she was poison. Nobody wanted their name anywhere near hers. Me. I kept my trap shut through the whole circus. Didn't crow about it, didn't rub her face in it, didn't even mention it. My focus was Mia and Jacob, keeping their little world steady while everything else went nuts. They were too small to get the full picture, but they felt the vibe shift. Alina wasn't that bold, untouchable mom anymore. She got quiet, pulled back, and for the first time in forever, she looked fragile. The weight of it all started cracking her open, fear of losing her shiny life, her freedom, us. You could see it etched all over her face. She took to crashing in the guest room, dodging me like I was a ghost. When we did bump into each other, she'd eyeball me like I was some puzzle she couldn't crack. One night, I was tucking Mia and Jacob in, and there she was, hovering in the doorway, just watching, not saying a peep. After I stepped out, she blocked my path in the hall. "Nathan," she said, voice all shaky and soft, "I didn't know. About Marcus. About any of it. I swear." I stared her down for a good long while, hunting for a shred of real in her eyes. Could have been the truth. Could have been a lie. By then, it was all the same to me, the damage was carved in stone, and no sorries were gonna unbreak it. "You knew plenty," I said, plain and simple, brushing past her and heading off. Her shoulders slumped, and right then, I saw her clear, not the big shot she played at, but a lost, busted-up woman who never saw the fallout coming. Lying in bed that night, this weird calm settled over me. Not joy, not some victory lap, just peace. The storm wasn't done raging, not by a mile, but for the first time in ages, I felt like I was steering my own ship again. Life's funny like that. For years, I'd been stuck in the background, shoving my own dreams aside, dimming myself down to let Alina shine. I thought that's what love was, handing over my happiness to prop hers up. But standing there in the ruins of what we had, it hit me, I'd been dead wrong. Real love doesn't mean torching yourself. It doesn't rip away who you are. And now, after all this time, I had a shot to figure out who Nathan was again. It didn't flip overnight, though. At first, I was just pissed, mad at Alina, sure, but madder at myself. Mad for letting her steamroll me. For biting my tongue when I should have roared. For turning into a damn welcome mat. But that fire in my gut? It started burning for something else. I took that fire in my belly and poured it into piecing my life back together, one brick at a time. First thing I did was claw back my own 2 feet. I dusted off my old resume, gave it a facelift, and started firing it out to jobs. Explaining that big hole in my work history. Yeah, that was a chore, but I didn't let it trip me up. After some hustle, I snagged a consulting gig at a little firm starting to spread its wings. Nothing flashy, but it was mine, something I hadn't had in years, a piece of turf just for me. The job lit a spark, gave me a reason to get up, but I wasn't done yet. I craved more, I wanted to dig up the parts of myself I'd buried. So I hit up old buddies, folks I hadn't talked to in forever. Some were thrown off hearing my voice again, others threw the door wide open like I'd never left. Little by little, I stitched together a crew, people who saw me for me, not for what I could hand them. Then there were Mia and Jacob, my rock through the whole damn mess. Every morning, I'd crack my eyes open with one mission, be the best dad I could muster. I'd drop M at school, wrestle through homework with M, and haul M to parks or museums on weekends. I didn't just want M to see me as their pops, I wanted M to look up to me, see a guy worth admiring. It wasn't only about showing them something, it was about proving it to myself too. For way too long, I'd let Alina's take on me call the shots on my value. But watching my kids run around, giggling like lunatics, it clicked, I was plenty. Didn't need her stamp of approval, or anybody's, to feel solid. Weeks stretched into months, and folks started picking up on the shift. Pals would say I looked surer of myself, like I wasn't hauling a ton of bricks anymore. Even the crew at work gave me props for how hard I was grinding. For the first time in ages, I felt a swell of pride, not just for what I'd pulled off, but for the guy I was turning into. The real change, though. It was inside. I figured out how to drop the grudge I'd been lugging around. Wasn't a cakewalk, anger's got a way of sinking its claws deep, but I knew I had to ditch it. Clinging to that bitterness would just chain me to yesterday, and I was over living like that. Alina clocked the difference too, watching from the sidelines as I patched my world back up. Her face was a mashup of jealousy and what might have been. One time, she came at me, trying to make amends. "I'm sorry," she said, tears streaking her cheeks. "For all of it, Marcus, how I treated you, everything." I bought that she meant it, but forgiving her didn't mean rewinding the clock. "I hear you," I said, keeping my voice steady but solid. "But we ain't going back. Too much water's gone under that bridge." She nodded, shoulders drooping like she'd run out a fight. It was the end cap we both needed. When the smoke cleared, I came out tougher, sharper, more sure of myself than ever. I wasn't that punching bag Alina used to mock anymore, I was somebody new, somebody better. For the first time in years, I felt loose, free. Deep down, I knew she'd crawl back eventually, not as that high and mighty gal she'd played, but as a beat-down shell looking for a lifeline. She'd always been too proud for her own good, but pride turns to dust when the walls start squeezing in. And for Alina, those walls had been tightening for months. It went down one quiet night. The kids were out cold, and I was parked at the dining table, flipping through some work stuff. The house was still as a graveyard, nothing like that wild night that flipped everything. Alina crept in, hesitant, her one straight stance all hunched over. No makeup, eyes sagging with weariness, she wasn't the Alina I'd known. This was a faded version, stripped of that bold front she used to wear like armor. "Nathan," she said, voice wobbling soft. I didn't look up, didn't bite, just let the quiet sit there, knowing she'd keep going. "Can we talk?" I shut my laptop, leaned back in the chair, and crossed my arms. "What's left to chew over, Alina?" I asked, calm but with an edge that wouldn't bend. "What else is there to hash out?" I said, and she winced like I'd flicked a switch, but she didn't back off. I need you to get it," she pressed on. "I never meant for it to spiral this far. I had no clue Marcus was tangled up in anything crooked, I swear. I figured it was all legit business." I locked eyes with her, not even blinking. The old Nathan might have caved, softened up at her teary eyes and shaky tone. But this wasn't about feeling sorry or patching things up, this was about cutting through the bull. "You didn't know?" I echoed, keeping my voice low and tight. "Or you just didn't want to see it?" She dropped her gaze, fingers fidgeting in her lap like a kid caught sneaking cookies. "Maybe I turned a blind eye," she mumbled, barely loud enough to hear. I got swept up in the glitz, the spotlight, the whole damn ride. After grinding so hard, I thought I'd earned it. Didn't clock what I was throwing away, till it was gone. Her words dangled there, thick with the kind of regret that sticks to your ribs. For a second, pity flickered in me, not for the chick who'd slapped me in front of her crew, but for the girl I used to love, the one who'd lost her way chasing fool's gold. You didn't just lose yourself, Alina, I said, voice steady as a drumbeat. You lost us, lost me. And for what? Marcus? Cash? A big shot title? Did it pay off? She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks like a busted faucet. No, she whispered. None of it was worth a damn. I was an idiot, Nathan, selfish, blind as a bat. I cut you deep, and there's no undoing it. I'm sorry. For all of it. Part of me wanted to buy it, and maybe part of me did. But forgiving her didn't mean wiping the slate clean. It's about facing what happened and figuring out what's next, and next, with Alina wasn't on the table. I'll take your sorry, I said at last, softening my tone just a hair. But that don't mean we're rewinding the clock. Too much has gone down, Alina. Too many bridges burned. She gave a slow nod, shoulders slumping like my words were a load she couldn't carry. I get it, she said, voice clogged with feeling. I want to make it right. Be better, for the kids, for you. Be better for you, I shot back. And for Mia and Jacob, they need a mom they can admire. But I ain't got what you're fishing for anymore. We sat there, quiet, stretching out heavy between us, packed with all the things we'd never say and the ghosts of what might have been. Then she stood, swiping at her face. Thanks, she said soft, for hearing me out, for letting it go. I'll try harder. As she shuffled off, a weird calm settled over me. It wasn't the fix she'd been gunning for, but it was the one I needed. Her begging forgiveness wasn't about gluing our marriage back together, it was about shutting the book. And right then, I knew I'd finally ditched the anger, the bitterness, the ache, not for her, but for me. If Alina's crash was a slow bleed, Marcus's was a full-on train wreck. That loudmouth swagger, that bulletproof act, it all folded up like cheap paper the second they hauled him out of my house in cuffs. His whole kingdom started cracking apart, chunk by chunk. Word of Marcus's bust hit the wires fast, hours, tops. The news vultures pounced, tearing into the story like it was fresh meat. Hotshot entrepreneur nailed for fraud and trafficking, screamed the headlines everywhere you looked. That glossy life he'd paraded online, the sleek cars, sharp suits, over-the-top trips, got peeled back, showing the filthy cash propping it up. I kept tabs on it all with this cool, detached interest. Seeing Marcus tank didn't get me dancing, but it did feel right, like the scales were tipping back. He'd bulldozed through folks without a care, and now the bill was due. The deeper they dug, the uglier it got. His rap sheet was a laundry list of dirty deeds coming to light. It wasn't just fraud and money laundering, Marcus's dirty game stretched wide, crisscrossing borders and roping in some heavy hitters. The cops peeled back layer after layer, hidden offshore stashes, sham businesses, and a long list of folks he'd bled dry, stripping him of every penny they'd saved. Marcus wasn't just a crook, he was a shark, chomping down on anybody dumb enough to get close. Even with the noose tightening, though, he kept that smug chin up. In court, he flashed that cocky grin at the cameras, still acting like he was king. "I'll be out before you blink," he bragged to the press at his first hearing. "Nobody locks down a guy like me." But the proof hit like a freight train, witnesses stepped up, papers got slapped on the table, and his whole house of lies got torched in broad daylight. That smirk of his started slipping as the walls caved in. The guy who thought he was untouchable was staring down a stack of charges that'd bury him for years. The trial turned into a damn circus, aired live for everybody to gawk at. They picked apart Marcus's every scam, tearing his name to shreds, till there was nothing left to salvage. Alina's name popped up plenty in the mess, but they didn't have enough hard dirt to drag her into the dock. Still, just having her tied to it smeared her worse, leaving her with nothing but a pile of guilt and embarrassment. When sentencing day rolled around, it was the last spike in his coffin. The judge didn't pull punches, slamming him with a stretch so long he'd be lucky to see daylight again. As they read it out, Marcus's big shot act finally cracked. He sank into his chair, face drained white, eyes hollowed out. The loudmouth who'd strutted like he owned the planet was just a shell now, a faint echo of what he used to be. But jail wasn't the end of his tumble. The folks he'd screwed, old partners, investors, even his so-called pals, came gunning for him, slapping lawsuits left and right, clawing for whatever scraps they could get. His cash got locked up, his stuff hauled off, and his name turned into a punchline for double-dealing and backstabbing. I kept my distance, watching it play out with this weird mix of good riddance and a pinch of feeling bad. Marcus dug his own grave, no question, but there's something heavy about seeing a guy who thought he ruled the world crash that hard. Still, I couldn't shake what he'd done, to me, to Alina, to a whole bunch of others. That smooth talk, that puffed-up attitude, that knack for twisting people around his finger, it was all a front, and underneath? Just a big fat zero. In the end, Marcus turned into a warning scratched in bold, nobody's bulletproof. His drop was fast, ugly, and total, no shot at climbing back. When I flicked off the TV after the last report on his case, this odd calm washed over me. Marcus was toast. His clout was gone, his pull reduced to zilch. The scales had tipped right, and that chunk of my life he barged into was finally sealed shut. It wasn't the first time Alina came looking for me, but this round was different. No waterworks, no pleading, none of that frantic edge in her tone. Instead, she carried this weight, like she'd finally wrestled with the whole damn mess and maybe even owned up to her part in it. It was late afternoon, and I was out on the patio, nursing a tea and watching Mia and Jacob dart around the yard, giggling like wild things. They didn't have a clue about the hurricane that had ripped through us, and I was damn thankful for that. I'd busted my hump to keep em shielded, to let em stay kids a while longer. Mind if I sit? Alina asked, hovering a few steps off, hands knotted up in front of her. She looked beat, older, somehow, even though it had only been a handful of months since her world imploded. I waved at the chair across from me. Go for it. She eased down, hands clasped on the table, staring at em like they'd spill some secret she hadn't worked up to asking yet. For a good stretch, we just sat there, quiet piling up between us, not awkward, but thick with stuff neither of us was saying. She broke it first. I've been chewing on things, she started, voice low and even, on everything, how I screwed you over, how I tanked us. I didn't jump in, wanted her to roll it out, let her unload whatever was on her chest without me cutting in. She sucked in a breath and kept going. I keep wondering how it all went sideways, she said, how I let it rot this bad, how I turned into somebody I don't even know anymore. She lifted her eyes to mine then, digging for something, and it hit me. I spent so long pinning it on you, your job quitting, your lack of hustle, you not matching the big life I pictured. But that was crap. It wasn't on you, it was me. That threw me. I'd braced for sorries, excuses, maybe her dodging the heat again. Not this, not her owning it, peeling her own skin back like that. I got so hung up on what I thought winning looked like, she pushed on, that I blew past what actually counted. Marcus and his circus reeled me in, 'cause it was a rush, 'cause it puffed me up. But it was all smoke, none of it held water. Now I've got nothing left. My name's mud, my gig's gone, my buddies bailed. Worst part? I lost you. Her voice hitched on that last bit, but she didn't fall apart. She wasn't here groveling for a redo, I could tell. She was here to stare down the wreck she'd made. Why didn't you push harder for us back then, she asked, barely above a whisper. Why didn't you yank me back before it was too late? I leaned back, letting her words float there. I'd wrestled that same damn question a million times over the last year. Looking at her now, the answer clicked into place. I fought, Alina, I said, voice steady but solid. Every damn day, I was in the ring for us. I fought when I ditched my job to back you up. I fought when I swallowed your jabs and your snickers, hoping you'd spot the guy you married, not the one you decided I'd turned into. But you didn't see me. After a while, I figured out it wasn't my battle to win, it was yours. And you didn't swing. She gave a slow nod, eyes glistening but holding tight, no tears spilling. My words sank in, weighing her down till her shoulders slumped. You're dead on, she said quiet. I didn't step up. Didn't give a damn about what we had, till it was dust. I'll carry that, till I'm old and gray. For a beat, a twinge of sorrow hit me, not for the woman parked across from me, but for the life we'd built once, that rock-solid love that used to feel like it'd never crack. That was long gone, though, and no pile of what-ifs could drag it back. I don't hate you, Alina, I said at last. Wish I could sometimes, but I don't. What we had, it's done. Maybe that's how it's supposed to be. Now we can both keep moving. She nodded again, a faint, half-sad smile tugging her lips. Thanks, she said, for keeping it real. For being way more than I ever earned. Then she got up and walked off, leaving me solo on the patio. I watched her fade out, this odd calm locking in. It wasn't the ending she'd banked on, but it was the one I didn't know I'd been chasing, a last showdown, not with yelling or finger-pointing, but with straight-up truth. The kids bolted over, their laughs bouncing around like firecrackers, and it hit me hard, I'd come out on top. Not by kicking Alina when she was down, but by standing steady through all the garbage she'd slung my way. I'd clawed back my pride, my life, my shot at tomorrow.